Hey everyone, tonight we begin with something loud. The sound of porcelain hitting hardwood at just the right angle that echo still rings in my ears. 20 sets of eyes turned toward me. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others stared like they'd just seen a ghost. And there I was, standing at the end of the long dining table, beige slacks splattered with mashed potatoes and a good dollop of gravy. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And comment below with your city and local time. I love knowing how far these stories reach. Now turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. It was supposed to be a lovely evening. Daniel, my only son, and his wife, Lindsay, had invited a group of their friends over for dinner in their beautiful 2-story home in Lexington, the kind of suburban dream that features custom backsplash double ovens and matching wine glasses. Lindsay loves her aesthetic. I brought a casserole, homemade my mother's recipe, the same one Daniel used to ask for on his birthday. We just sat down when it happened. Lindsay reached across the table, picked up my plate, and with a sharp snap of her wrist, launched it across the floor. "Old Shrew," she said through clenched teeth. "Get out of my life." Now you'd think that kind of thing would suck the air right out of a room. It didn't. The room just froze. A couple of her friends gasped. One woman grabbed her wine and muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath. But no one stood up, no one said a word. And Daniel, my Daniel, just whispered, "Mom, please, just go." He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, or maybe at the casserole. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was confused, humiliated. My hands were shaking as I reached for my purse. My cardigan was already over my arm. I had this awful instinct that told me to make it easier for them. Like, don't worry, I'll cleanly exit your picture-perfect evening. As I walked to the door, I caught sight of Sophie and Teddy standing on the stairs, 7 and 5. Sophie held Teddy's hand. They were watching with those wide, unsure eyes that kids get when the grown-up world gets ugly. I smiled at them. I think I did anyway. The night air hit me like a slap, but not in the waking up kind of way. More like the kind that lets you know how very alone you are. The drive home was all blurs. I passed the bakery where Daniel used to get Saturday donuts with me, the gas station where I taught him to check oil levels, little places that became quiet witnesses to a mother's life. I pulled into the driveway of my little house, the one I've lived in for 40 years. It's not much, but it's home. It's where I raised Daniel after his father, Frank, passed away. That boy was 10 when Frank died, and it was just the two of us after that. I stepped inside casserole still warm and unopened in its dish. I didn't even put it in the fridge. Just sank onto the couch in my stained clothes and cried. My phone buzzed. Daniel. "Mom, I'm sorry about tonight. Lindsay's just stressed with work. Give her some space." Space. I've been giving them space for years. So much space that my grandchildren started calling me Miss Carolyn instead of Grandma. That's not a joke. That happened last Thanksgiving. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't get stolen all at once. It's chipped away. A missed invitation here. We're busy this weekend there. A birthday party I only saw through Facebook pictures. Lindsay always had a reason and Daniel always accepted it. I shuffled to the bathroom and caught my reflection. Puffy eyes, slumped shoulders, mascara I forgot to put on, still sitting on the counter. I looked like someone who'd been erased in slow motion. And worse, I believed I'd let it happen. That night, I had a dream Lindsay shouting Daniel, whispering, the plate shattering again and again like a bad laugh track. But in the dream, I didn't walk out. I stood up, slammed my hand on the table, and said, "You don't get to rewrite who I am." When I woke up, my hand was clenched so tight around my bedsheet, my knuckles hurt. By morning, the house was too quiet. I made tea in my chipped mug, the one with a little cardinal on it. That mug's been around longer than Lindsay. I called my best friend Rita Holloway. She's the kind of woman who uses a floral oven mitt like it's armor, and once got banned from a church book club for not having enough filter. When she answered, her voice was already sharp. "Carolyn, tell me you finally had enough." I did. I didn't know it last night, but I knew it when she asked. "I can't just cut them off, Rita. I'll never see the kids again." She sighed deep and long. Then what are you gonna do? Keep letting her treat you like wallpaper. That woman's got all the charm of wet drywall and twice the ego. I laughed first time in 2 days. You need to find your leverage, honey, Rita said. Every bully counts on silence. That afternoon, I wandered aimlessly through the house, ending up in the attic. I don't know what drew me there. Maybe I was looking for distractions. Maybe I was looking for pieces of myself. It was stuffy and smelled like old crayons and mothballs. I started opening boxes, Daniel's baseball trophies, his art projects, a few of Frank's cufflinks. I found our old Mitchell family movie night sign made from glitter and hope. And then behind an old trunk, I saw a yellowed manila envelope, taped shut, heavy, with forgotten weight. When I opened it, my heart did something strange. It fluttered, then steadied, because inside were documents I hadn't seen in years, the deed to Daniel and Lindsay's house, or what I thought was their house. Frank had bought the property before his heart attack. He was going to turn it into a rental, but he died before that could happen. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, so I held on to it. Years later, when Daniel and Lindsay got engaged and mentioned they were house hunting, I'd done what any mother who wanted to help would do. I handed them the key. Told them it was theirs. An early inheritance, I'd said. Your father would have wanted this, but I never transferred the deed. The house was still in my name. I stared at the paper. My hands trembled, but not from sadness this time. Something else was rising. Not anger, not revenge. It felt like gravity returning to me. I sat on the attic floor, that yellowed envelope cradled in my lap like it was made of glass. The papers were official, dusty, a little curled at the edges, but still very much real. Frank's signature, the county seal, the original tax documents, all of it said one thing, loud and clear. I still owned the house. The same house Lindsay threw me out of, like I was a stranger knocking on the wrong door. I came downstairs in a fog, papers pressed tight to my chest. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and age, like my house was watching me and gently saying, "It's about time." I spread the documents across the kitchen table next to my chipped cardinal mug. One by one, I laid out the evidence, like a prosecutor preparing for court. Deed, tax records, insurance forms. It was all there. At first I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe we had transferred the title and I'd just forgotten. Maybe Daniel had taken over the taxes. But every line, every signature said the same thing. Carolyn Mitchell, sole owner. You ever have one of those moments where your past self left behind a little gift wrapped in pain? Sure, but useful all the same. Frank bought that property for our future. I had kept it for Daniel's. But Lindsay had treated it like her trophy, her fortress, her stage. And suddenly she wasn't standing on solid ground anymore. That night, I barely slept again. I didn't cry, though. I paced. I brewed tea at 2:17 a.m. I made toast and forgot to eat it. My brain kept asking the same question. What do I do now? Because information is power, but only if you use it. By morning, I needed fresh air, or at least fresh gossip. So I stepped onto the front porch, wrapped in an old cardigan, and called Joanne Baxter, my neighbor. The type who watches the neighborhood like it's her daytime soap. She answered on the first ring. "Joanne, it's Carolyn. I need to talk to someone who remembers when phones still had cords." She chuckled. "Honey, come sit on the porch. I'll bring the good coffee." Her porch swing creaked in that comforting way like it was keeping secrets. I sipped her too strong coffee and finally said it out loud. "I still own their house." Joanne blinked. "Well, I'll be." I nodded. She threw me out of my own house. Then Joanne leaned in, her voice dropping like she was about to share nuclear codes. I wasn't going to say anything, she whispered, but "I've seen Lindsay with someone." I blinked. "You mean like a friend?" Her lips twisted. "Not unless friends kiss in parked cars and meet at the Parkside Inn." My stomach turned. Joanne told me she'd spotted Lindsay meeting the same man multiple times at the Maple Street Cafe in his car and once disappearing into a hotel. She hadn't told Daniel because she didn't want to start trouble, but now it seemed like more than neighborhood trivia. "He's tall," she added, like that helped, "and too tan to be from here." I sat on my porch long after Joanne left, her words ringing louder than the wind chimes. Lindsay was cheating on Daniel, and she was doing it from my house. I felt the pressure build behind my ribs, not quite rage, not sadness either. Just that deep, burning sensation of injustice, the kind that makes your back straighten. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything. The way she'd made me feel like an intruder. The way Daniel had been slowly pulled away from me. The birthday parties I missed. The holidays where I was too much. The plate. Thrown at my feet like I was the garbage. I wasn't ready to tell Daniel, not yet. He loved her blindly maybe, but real love makes people not see the obvious. And besides, if I told him now, Lindsay would twist it. She'd say I was trying to sabotage them, that I was bitter. But I had something better than bitterness. I had the facts. Still, Rita was right, I needed leverage, something solid. So I grabbed my purse, slipped on some sensible sneakers, and headed to Maple Street. Now let me pause here for a moment and share one of those odd little truths that comes with age. When you reach a certain number of gray hairs, people stop paying attention to you. They forget you're in the room. Or they assume you're just an old woman buying jam. Which is why no one gave me a second glance as I sat quietly at the corner table near the window sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending to scroll through Pinterest. And there they were, Lindsay and Mr. Tan and Tall, sitting outside, laughing, holding hands across the table like teenagers. I didn't want to believe it. Part of me was still clinging to the hope that Joanne had misunderstood. But no, they were holding hands like they'd done it 100 times before. When she kissed him full on the mouth, right there in broad daylight, I snapped a picture. My hands weren't even shaking. They left the cafe, walking arm in arm. I followed them slowly from a respectful distance, like a librarian playing detective. He opened the car door for her. She leaned in again. Another kiss. I took 3 more pictures just to be sure. They drove to the edge of town to the Parkside Inn, just like Joanne said. I didn't follow inside. I didn't need to. That night, I spread the printed photos next to the deed on my kitchen table. 2 neat little stacks. One about property, the other about betrayal. And suddenly, for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel helpless. I didn't feel like someone who needed to wait for kindness. I didn't feel small. I felt like Carolyn Mitchell again, Frank's wife, Daniel's mother, Sophie and Teddy's Grammy. The woman who once negotiated a mortgage with a handshake and a homemade peach pie. I called Rita, told her everything. She didn't say I told you so. She just said, "What are you going to do, honey?" And I said, "I'm going to write her a letter." I sat at my old desk, the one Frank built when Daniel was still in diapers, and pulled out a sheet of thick stationery. The kind that still smells faintly of cedar and waiting. Funny, isn't it? All the big decisions in life often start at a desk. Marriage licenses, birth announcements, death notices, and now this. I held the pen steady in my hand. My fingers weren't trembling anymore. My tea had gone cold beside me, but I didn't care. I took a breath and began to write. "Lindsay, there are 3 things I need you to know." That's how I opened it. No, dear, no, sincerely. Just clean, clear, and deliberate. First, I told her about the house she lived in, the one she called her sanctuary, her forever home, her empire of neutral tones. I explained plainly that I had never transferred the deed, that the house was legally still in my name. I attached copies of the property documents highlighted, tabbed, dated. Second, I told her what I knew about the man on Maple Street, about the cafe, the kisses, the hotel. And no, I didn't get poetic. I didn't insult her. I simply said, I have photographic evidence, several of which are enclosed, because that's all that needed to be said. And third, I wrote this. I love my son and my grandchildren more than anything. I have tolerated your cruelty, your manipulation, and your lies in the hope of preserving my family. That stops now. I wasn't cruel, but I was done playing nice for the sake of peace that never came. I closed the letter with a choice. End the affair, start treating me with basic respect, or I will tell Daniel everything and initiate legal action to reclaim the home. You have until Friday. Carolyn. I sat back and read the letter twice. It didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like boundaries, something I hadn't set in years. As I sealed the envelope, I had the strangest thought. This must be what fresh air feels like in the soul. I printed the photos, just a few, not everything. I included the clearest ones, the hand-holding, the kiss by the car, the time-stamped entry at the hotel. I gathered everything, slid it into a crisp manila envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter like it was made of gold. Tomorrow was Monday. And on Monday, Lindsay Carson Mitchell was going to fall out of her chair. The morning arrived bright and crisp, as if Lexington had no idea the emotional meteor I was about to deliver. I wore a soft blue dress that Rita always said brought out my eyes, and comfortable but elegant shoes. I curled my hair slightly, put on lipstick for the first time in months, and packed the envelope carefully into my purse. No perfume, though. I didn't want to leave anything in the air but facts. Daniel would already be at work. The kids would be at school. Lindsay liked to use Monday mornings to reset the energy in the home, or more accurately, scroll on her phone while sipping cucumber water in yoga pants she never sweated in. I parked 3 houses away, walked up their stone path. My heart wasn't pounding. I wasn't second-guessing. The envelope felt warm in my hand, as if the ink itself still carried heat. I rang the doorbell. It took her a moment. Then I heard the soft click of the lock. And there she was, Lindsay, perfect as ever, designer blouse, lipstick sharp enough to cut glass. Her expression shifted immediately. First surprise, then tight irritation. "Carolyn," she said flatly, "Daniel's at work. I know I said. I came to see you." She crossed her arms, didn't move from the doorway. "You really think this is the time?" "This won't take long." Reluctantly, she stepped aside and led me into the living room, the very room where she'd humiliated me. The same rug was there, no sign of my shattered plate. She stood arms still crossed. So, I handed her the envelope. Her eyes narrowed. "What's this?" "Something you need to read. Before Friday." She opened it cautiously, like she expected glitter to explode out and ruin her upholstery. She scanned the first page, the part about the deed. Her eyes widened. She flipped to the property records. Her fingers tightened. She swallowed. And then, the photos. Oh, how the color drained from her face, like watching snow fall in reverse. She turned a shade of ash that not even her $200 contour palette could correct. She sat down hard, didn't even try to look composed. "This," she stammered, "this is insane. These photos, they're nothing. And that paperwork, it's outdated." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there, like a wall she couldn't knock over. "The photos show exactly what they show," I said, "and the property records are current. I confirmed them on Friday with the county office. You had no right to spy on me, and you had no right to throw me out of my own house." She flinched. "You've lied. You've twisted my son's mind. You've stolen years from me with my grandchildren, and you've done it all from the comfort of a home that doesn't belong to you." Her jaw clenched. "You're blackmailing me." "No," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I'm giving you a choice." Her voice rose. "If you tell Daniel it'll destroy him, do you really want to be the one who breaks his heart?" I looked at her, really looked. This woman who had built a castle on sand. I'm not the one who betrayed him. She stood now, trembling, fists clenched. "You think you've won?" she said, barely above a whisper. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything back?" "This isn't about winning," I said gently. "It's about truth and family and respect." She didn't respond. She just stared, silent and pale. I turned toward the door. "You have until Friday, Lindsay. Think carefully." As I walked down the path, sunlight brushed my shoulders. It was the same house, same flowers in the garden, same front steps. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest there. I felt like what I was the woman who built it all. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd already missed 2 calls. One from Lindsay, one from Daniel. Both went to voicemail. I didn't rush to listen to them. I made myself a sandwich, first turkey, on rye, no mustard. I took off my flats, sat in the sunroom, let the breeze sneak in through the screen door and rustle the old curtains, because I knew what was coming. The storm after the silence. And I wanted one last moment of peace before it arrived. When I finally checked my phone, Lindsay's message was exactly what I expected. "You're going to regret this, Carolyn. You have no idea what kind of damage you're causing. Daniel is devastated. He doesn't understand what's happening. You did this." I played it twice, not because I needed to, but because something about her tone had changed. She sounded off, not angry, not defensive, just small. Then came Daniel's voice. "Mom, Lindsay says you threatened to evict us. I don't know what's going on, but please, can we talk? In person, I just want to understand." My heart twisted. I could hear the confusion in his voice, the tug of war between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. I called him back. "Daniel, can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour?" There was a pause. "Yeah, okay, but Mom, please, let's not make this worse." I didn't answer that part, because sometimes silence says more than explanation ever could. Riverside Park had always been our quiet spot. Daniel used to bring me dandelions there as a little boy, roots still attached. We'd feed ducks, skip stones, count clouds. Now I sat on the old wooden bench near the footbridge, envelope in hand, waiting for the man that little boy had become. When he arrived, he looked tired. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled. His hair still held that nervous boy habit ruffled from running fingers through it too many times. He sat beside me, legs bouncing. "Mom," he started, "what is happening?" I handed him the envelope. "Before I say anything, I need you to look through these." He opened it slowly, uncertain. First, the property records. His eyes scanned the pages, then darted to me. "You never transferred it." I thought I did, or I meant to, but no, I didn't. He blinked hard. "We've lived there for 5 years, and I've never once asked you for a penny." He rubbed his jaw. "Okay, we can fix that. I'll talk to a lawyer, get it in my name." "There's more, Daniel." He froze. I passed him the photos. He looked down. First photo, Lindsay and the man holding hands outside the cafe. Second, laughing, leaning close. Third, a kiss, unmistakable, time-stamped. His breath caught. He shuffled through the rest like he was searching for a lie. "No," he said, "no, this can't be real." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. His hands shook. His jaw clenched. His entire body shifted as if trying to keep his grief from spilling. "How long have you known?" "Just since Sunday. Joanne told me first. I went to see for myself." He stood up, paced a few steps away, then turned to face me. "Why didn't you come to me first?" "Because I knew you wouldn't believe me. Not until you saw it." His face, his beautiful, broken face, crumpled for a moment. Then he pulled himself together. She said you threatened her." I nodded slowly. I told her the truth, that I still own the house, and that I wouldn't stay quiet anymore. "I can't believe she did this." "You can," I said softly, "but I know you don't want to." He dropped onto the bench beside me again, head in his hands. "She told me you were manipulative, that you couldn't let go, that you made her feel unsafe around you." My throat tightened. "I know," I said. "She's been laying that groundwork for years." He looked at me, really looked at me. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to apologize. You just have to decide what to do next." For a while, we sat in silence, the wind brushing past us like a careful friend. Daniel finally spoke. "I can't let Sophie and Teddy grow up in a house built on lies." "No," I agreed. "What do I even say to her?" "That's up to you, but you have the truth now. Use it." He looked out at the river, the way it shimmered and kept moving no matter what chaos happened on the banks. "I might need a place to stay," he said quietly. I smiled. "Then we'll make dinosaur pancakes in the morning." He laughed just barely, but it was real. When I got home, I changed into my comfy flannel pajamas and sat with a bowl of ice cream on my porch. The sun was setting slow and gold over Lexington, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the villain in someone else's story. I felt like the author. Insight of the day. Sometimes power isn't about yelling louder, it's about waiting until someone else can finally hear you whisper. Quirky fact, the average American home has 7 unfinished home improvement projects. Apparently, ownership isn't the same as control. Academically debatable phrase, time heals all wounds, except the ones you never acknowledge. I didn't hear from Lindsay that night. Not a call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive email about boundaries or emotional maturity. Just silence. The kind that hums in your ears because something is definitely brewing. Daniel called the next morning. His voice was flat but steady. I confronted her. She denied it at first, then cried, then tried to blame me. I sighed. "I'm so sorry." She said I was distant, that I never really understood her, that our marriage felt hollow, all the usual hits. And did she mention the man from the cafe? She said he was a friend. He paused. I showed her the pictures. Another pause. She stopped talking after that. The rest of the week blurred like watercolor left in the rain. I kept myself busy reorganizing cabinets that didn't need reorganizing, wiping baseboards with vinegar and folding towels in that fancy hotel style that never lasts past one use. On Thursday, Daniel dropped by after work. He looked like someone who'd just gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring with himself. He sat at the kitchen table and picked at a biscuit I'd made. "She's not coming back from this," he said, voice quiet. "She's filing for divorce." He shook his head. "No, not yet. She's still trying to rewrite the story. She's saying you manipulated her, that you faked everything, even the photos." I didn't even flinch. "That's what desperate people do, Daniel. They rewrite history when the truth doesn't serve them anymore." He nodded slowly, fingers pressed against his temple. "I told her we're done. I want custody of the kids. I want out. I don't care how messy it gets." A breath I hadn't realized I was holding finally escaped my chest. "You're sure?" I asked. "Yes, but I can't stay in that house with her mom. Not for one more night." "Then bring the kids. You're coming home." That night, my house shifted. Literally. The air got louder, softer, fuller. Suitcases landed in the hallway. Sophie ran barefoot down the hallway, yelling, "I call the big couch." Teddy hugged my legs like they were tree trunks. Daniel followed with weary eyes but grateful shoulders. The silence that had haunted me was gone, and in its place, the beautiful, controlled chaos of family. We made dinosaur pancakes the next morning. Teddy wanted his to be a stegosauricorn, which, as it turns out, is impossible unless you combine pancake batter with delusion. Sophie insisted hers wear a syrup bow. Daniel drank his coffee quietly at the table, watching his kids squeal with maple syrup on their cheeks. I saw something shift in his face just a little. Something uncoiled. "Mom," he said, "I think this might be the best I've slept in years." "Don't get too cozy," I teased. "You're still doing the dishes." His smile was tired but real. Later that day, while the kids napped and Daniel caught up on work calls in the den, I sat outside on the porch with a folder. The folder. Inside were the original deed papers and new transfer documents I'd requested from the county office. Because here's the truth, I never wanted to use that house against them. It was a gift, not a weapon. But the fact that Lindsay had taken it for granted, used it to gatekeep me from my own family, had twisted something sacred. Now that Daniel had seen the truth, it was time to finish what I started. When I showed him the folder that evening, he looked stunned. "Mom, you're giving it to me." "You were always supposed to have it," I said. "I just never got around to the paperwork. And now, I'd like to do it right." He blinked hard. "I don't deserve this. You don't deserve what she did to you either. But we don't get to choose how people fail us. Only how we stand afterward." He reached for my hand, eyes glossy. "Thank you." And that was enough. More than enough. That night, after the kids were tucked in, Daniel and I sat on the back porch under a sky so clear it felt fake. The stars were doing their glittering thing and the crickets were going full Broadway. He leaned back in the wicker chair. "I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't found those papers. You'd still be married. Miserable. And I'd still be watching from the sidelines. Would you have ever said anything?" I thought for a moment, eventually. But I had to find my courage first. And where was it hiding? In a dusty envelope behind a trunk full of forgotten trophies. He laughed, shaking his head. "You always did know how to make a comeback. I've had a lot of practice." Inside of the day, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rustles, in an attic, in old paper, in quiet certainty. Quirky fact, pancake batter is more structurally complex than concrete. Don't ask me how, but apparently MIT tested it. Academically debatable phrase, people don't change. I'd argue they do, they just need the right mirror. Monday came around again, crisp and full of that late fall light that makes everything look more honest than it should. Daniel was up early, shuffling around the kitchen in pajama pants and a college hoodie, trying to make toast without waking the kids. I could tell he hadn't slept much. And I knew why. "I'm meeting with a lawyer this afternoon," he said between bites. "I'm not waiting for her to make the next move." I nodded, handing him a real mug of coffee. "No paper cups in this house. Do you think she'll fight?" "She'll posture. She might scream. But I don't think she'll have much ground left once the papers hit her hands." I took a sip of my own coffee. She's underestimated you for a long time. He gave me a tired smile. She underestimated us. The rest of the morning was quiet. Sophie helped me dust the living room while Teddy insisted that the vacuum was chasing his toes. I let him believe it. Childhood should be full of nonsense and silliness, especially when the grown-up world starts wobbling. Just after noon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it there, she was Lindsay. No makeup, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. She looked like someone on the wrong end of a decision. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. "Carolyn," she said softly, "can we talk?" I raised an eyebrow. "Now's not a great time." I need 5 minutes, please." I stared at her for a long beat. Then finally, okay, porch only. She nodded and sat on the top step. For a second, we were just two tired women holding broken pieces of a family. "I know you hate me," she began. "I don't," I replied honestly. "I just stopped fearing you." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I made a mess of things," she said, "more than I even realized." I didn't respond. I wanted to hear where she was going without giving her a rope to climb back up with. I thought I was protecting my marriage. I thought keeping Daniel close meant pushing you away. I was wrong. "You were cruel," I said gently. "There's a difference." She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. "I was jealous of what you two had. I know that sounds childish. It sounds honest." She looked up, her eyes glassy. "Do you hate me for that?" "No, I pity you for it." Her breath caught. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good, because forgiveness isn't something you expect. It's something you earn." We sat in silence, the wind rustling the leaves on the old oak tree. Somewhere inside, Teddy giggled, and the sound twisted something in her face. "I miss them," she said, voice cracking. "I know. I love them." "I believe you." But I wasn't a good wife, or mother, or daughter-in-law. I looked at her for a long time. "Lindsay, if you truly love those kids, then let Daniel build a life with them that isn't tethered to betrayal. Don't drag this out in court. Don't make them pawns." She nodded slowly, wiping her cheek. "I'm going to sign whatever he gives me. No contest. I owe him that and them." "And what about you?" She hesitated. "I'm seeing someone, a therapist. I need to figure out why I burned it all down." I stood. "That's between you and the fire." Before she left, she turned to me again. "Carolyn, thank you for not destroying me." "You could have." "No, Lindsay, you already did that part yourself." After she left, I stayed on the porch for a while longer, watching the clouds shift above Lexington like someone had stirred the sky with a giant spoon. Daniel stepped outside, his voice low. "Was that who I think it was?" I nodded. "What did she want?" "To surrender, I think." He sat beside me. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now." "You don't have to know. Not today." He was quiet, then said, "Sophie asked if we could stay here forever." "She can," I said. "All of you can." Later that night, we made pizza from scratch, the kind that gets flour everywhere. Teddy turned his dough into a shape that looked vaguely like Nebraska, and Sophie insisted hers was a pizza butterfly. Daniel poured us each a glass of red wine. We clinked, quietly, to what he asked. I thought for a moment, to rebuilding, and to not needing all the answers right away. He smiled. "I'll drink to that." After the kids were tucked in, I sat in the den, flipping through an old photo album. Frank smiling in the backyard, Daniel holding a toy hammer, me in a sun hat looking like I knew more than I admitted. I closed it gently, because the past didn't need to be erased. It just needed to be honored and placed on the shelf. Insight of the day, sometimes the strongest thing you can say is, "That's enough." Quirky fact, the word porch comes from the Latin porta, meaning gate, but mine's always been more of a sanctuary. Academically debatable phrase, closure is a myth. Or maybe closure is just silence that no longer hurts. The following week settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt since Daniel was in middle school and still left his dirty socks under the couch cushions. Mornings were noisy again, cereal bowls clinking, cartoons murmuring from the TV, tiny feet thudding across hardwood like a stampede of miniature horses. Every now and then, I'd catch Daniel standing in the hallway just watching. The kind of watching you do when you know everything is fragile but worth it. By Wednesday, Sophie had named the guest room the Cozy Cave, and Teddy had started calling my backyard Camp Grammy. I didn't correct either of them. It wasn't perfect. There were moments. Sophie cried at bedtime because she missed the pink nightlight from her old room. Teddy asked if Mommy was coming back to read him his favorite story. And Daniel, he carried something heavy in his shoulders that even 8 hours of sleep couldn't fix. But in the quiet of the afternoons, when Teddy was curled up in a blanket fort and Sophie was coloring at the kitchen table, I could feel it. Healing, not loudly, but undeniably. On Thursday, I found Daniel sitting on the porch steps in his dress shirt and slacks tie draped over his knee like a flag of surrender. "I filed the divorce paperwork this morning," he said without looking up. "It's done." I sat beside him, the breeze nudging a few dried leaves across the walkway. She said she won't contest anything, not custody, not the house. I nodded. That's the right call. He was quiet for a while. Then he looked at me. "You ever feel like you lost years and didn't even notice until they were already gone?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "And then one day you wake up and realize you're allowed to take them back." He exhaled through his nose. That day came late, but not too late. He tilted his head, looked up at the big maple tree above us. "Teddy asked if you were going to stay alive forever." I laughed. Bold question. He said he hopes you will because Grammy makes the best pancakes and knows all the warm spots in a blanket. "Well," I said, patting his knee, "that's about as close to immortality as I'll ever get." That weekend, Daniel took the kids to the park while I stayed behind and did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out my paints. They were dusty, the brushes stiff, but the moment I dipped a brush in water, I felt something unclench. I didn't paint anything special, just a bowl of oranges on the counter, the morning light slanting through the kitchen window. But it reminded me that I'm still here. Not just surviving. Living. That Sunday, something unexpected happened. Lindsay texted. Just 2 words. "Thank you." I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. On Monday morning, Daniel and I walked through the old house together, his house now. The kids stayed with Rita for the afternoon, and we brought coffee and a notebook to make a plan. "I want to make it ours again," he said, stepping into the master bedroom. "Not mine and Lindsay's, just mine and the kids." I nodded. "Paint helps, so do curtains." He smiled. "You always know where to start." We made lists, talked about furniture, chose new colors for the walls. He wanted a chalkboard wall in the dining room for the kids. I suggested navy blue cabinets for the kitchen, which he immediately vetoed. Progress. And as we stood in the doorway looking at the empty living room, I saw it. That same little flicker in his eyes that Frank used to get when he had a project in front of him. A little tired, a little scared, but ready. Back at my house that evening, the kids were on the porch swing eating popsicles. Daniel watched them for a minute, then turned to me. "I'm going to move back in next month. Once the furniture's sorted." I nodded. "Good, it'll be nice to see that house full again." "Will you be okay?" I smiled. "I'll be lonely for a bit, but I've got projects, paintings, and Rita will probably invent a new crisis by Tuesday." He laughed. "And besides," I said, sipping my tea, "this isn't goodbye, it's just shifting the story a little." Inside of the day, moving on doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes it means walking back, but with your eyes open. Quirky fact, Crayola has a color called macaroni and cheese. It is objectively both adorable and unsettling. Academically debatable phrase, everything happens for a reason. Or maybe some things just happen, and we're the ones who give it meaning. Daniel and the kids moved into their house on a breezy Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that made the trees look like they were whispering to one another. Rita came over to help, bringing plastic tubs labeled in Sharpie and a lasagna that could feed half of Lexington. Sophie twirled through the living room with a stuffed unicorn under one arm. Teddy sat on the floor in the dining room arranging action figures like little generals preparing for a plastic war. And Daniel, he stood in the center of the kitchen, a bit overwhelmed, a bit amazed. I watched him take it all in, the cabinets, the windows, the light, and I could tell he was finally seeing the house as his. Not Lindsay's curated showpiece, not a hollow battleground, but a new beginning. That night, after the final box had been dragged in and the kids were tucked into their new rooms, Daniel walked me to my car. "Thanks for staying the whole day," he said. "I know this wasn't easy for you." "It's not about easy," I said, reaching up to straighten the collar on his flannel shirt. "It's about worth it." He looked around the porch, new welcome mat flower pots, Sophie helped arrange, and then back at me. "You really think we'll be okay?" "I know you will," I said. "Because you're showing up. That's the hardest part." He hugged me tight and quiet, and when he let go, something inside both of us had shifted. The roles of mother and son caregiver and grown man gently rebalanced. The next morning, my house was quiet again, eerily so. No little feet, no spilled juice, no cartoon theme song stuck in my head by 9 a.m., just me, my tea, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. And yet I didn't feel empty. I felt proud. By midweek, Daniel sent photos of the house, Sophie's new nightlight, casting little stars across her wall. Teddy asleep with a book spread across his chest, a chalkboard in the dining room with crooked little drawings that vaguely resembled people. He'd added a caption, "We're good, you were right." The following Friday, I had a knock on my door just after lunch, and for the second time in as many months, it was Lindsay. She wasn't wearing designer jeans or hiding behind lip gloss this time, just a plain cardigan jeans and a nervous smile. "Hi," she said, eyes darting down. "Lindsay," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Everything okay?" "Yes." "No, sort of. Can I come in for a minute?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat in the same kitchen chair where I'd once sat crying over her cruelty. Now she was the one with puffy eyes and shaky hands. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said quickly. "I just needed to tell you something." I sat across from her, folding my hands. "I've been going to therapy," she continued. "Real therapy, not just venting with wine." A flicker of humor. Points for that. "I know I hurt you. Badly. And I hurt Daniel. And the kids. And I don't expect anyone to forget that. But I want to try to be better. For them. For myself." I nodded slowly. "That's a start." "I was angry at you," she said, voice cracking. "Not because you were cruel, because you were present. Because Daniel loved you in a way I couldn't replicate. That's not a competition, Lindsay. I know that now," she said. "But back then, I made it one. And I lost." We sat in the quiet of my kitchen, old linoleum floors and all, the same space where I'd once begged for a seat at the table of my own family. She took a deep breath. "If Daniel lets me visit the kids again, I won't interfere. I'll be grateful for whatever I'm given." "I'll hold you to that," I said gently. She nodded. "I hope you do." Before she left, she paused at the doorway. "You taught me something, Carolyn. Not just about boundaries, but about love. The kind that shows up even when it's not returned." I watched her walk down the path, a little less sure than she'd once been, but maybe a little more human. That evening, Daniel stopped by after work to pick up a few things the kids had forgotten. I told him about Lindsay's visit. "Was she sincere?" he asked. "She was scared. But honest," I said. "That's a beginning." "I still don't know if I can ever trust her again," he admitted. "You don't have to know right now," I said. "Just keep doing what's right for the kids." He nodded, kissed my cheek, and headed back out the door. That night, I painted again. Something new. A porch with light spilling across the floorboards. No people, just shadows, quiet but full. Insight of the day, redemption doesn't erase the past. It just changes your relationship with it. Quirky fact, the average American moves 11.7 times in a lifetime. Emotional moves far more. Academically debatable phrase. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Maybe. Or maybe some people finally wake up before it's too late. By the time April rolled around, Lexington had begun to bloom again, dogwoods in the yards, soft yellow daffodils lining the roads, and that hopeful scent in the air that told you winter was officially on its way out. It matched the mood in Daniel's house. Every time I stopped by, there was some little change. New curtains in the kids' room, a freshly painted wall in the dining room, a homemade birdhouse hanging from the backyard maple tree. The house felt lighter, lived in, loved again. On one particular Saturday, I brought over a blueberry cobbler and found Daniel out front hammering together a raised garden bed, while Teddy supervised with a plastic toy hammer of his own. "Planning to grow anything edible?" I asked, handing him a cold bottle of water. Daniel grinned. That depends on whether Teddy stops burying Hot Wheels in the dirt. Teddy beamed proudly. They're going to grow into monster trucks. I laughed. Well, I can't argue with that logic. Later, while Sophie and Teddy played in the sprinkler, Daniel and I sat on the porch, the cobbler between us still steaming. I heard from Lindsay again, he said after a while. She's asking for supervised visits, just once or twice a month. I stirred my coffee slowly. And what did you say? I said yes, but only if she keeps working on herself. The kids deserve to know both parents if both parents are safe. I looked at him. He looked tired. Yes, but steady. That quiet, sturdy kind of strength Frank used to have in the rare moments he wasn't joking or fixing something. You're doing the right thing, I said. I hope so, he replied. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being too generous. You're not, I said. You're being what your kids need. That's not weakness, Daniel. That's fatherhood. The first visit came the following week. Lindsay met Daniel and the kids at the public library. A neutral zone, no toys to fight over, no bedrooms to reopen wounds, just books and beanbags. She brought coloring books, stayed an hour, hugged them both lightly, and left before it got messy. That night, Daniel called me. They were quiet afterward, thoughtful. Sophie asked why Mommy smelled like vanilla again. I didn't have an answer for that. Sometimes grief remembers scent before it remembers faces. Do you think this will get easier? He asked. I think healing's like gardening, I said. Sometimes you don't see growth for weeks, then one day there it is. He didn't speak, but I heard him breathing on the other end, slow and deep. A few days later, Sophie came home from school with a crayon drawing of our house. Mine, not Daniel's. It had her name, Teddy's name, Daniel's, and mine written in uneven letters across the roof. Above it, she wrote in pink marker, "Our safe place." I didn't cry, but I did sit with that paper in my lap for a long time. On a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Rita and I sat on her porch sipping iced tea and watching traffic crawl down the street. She raised an eyebrow. You look settled. That's new. I feel settled, I said. She smiled. You know, when you first called me after that dinner party, I thought you'd finally snapped. I had snapped, but in a good way. She laughed. Only you could snap and still make blueberry cobbler. I looked out across the neighborhood. Do you think people like Lindsay can change? Rita thought for a moment, then said, I think people don't change until it costs them something they can't replace. That weekend, Daniel invited me over for dinner. He tried to anyway. The lasagna came out a bit soupy, but the salad was fresh and the kids set the table with mismatched forks and a centerpiece of dandelions. It was perfect. During dessert, Teddy asked if we could all go on a sleepover vacation this summer, somewhere with a pool and maybe 3 scoops of ice cream allowed. Daniel looked at me. What do you think, Mom? You up for a road trip? Only if I get to control the music, I said. Grammy music only, Sophie declared. That means soft songs and spooky podcasts. We all laughed. And in that moment, something clicked. Not a full circle. Not closure, but peace. And peace, as it turns out, is louder than rage when you let it linger. Insight of the day. Sometimes what we lose isn't the person, it's the illusion. And that's a loss worth grieving. Quirky fact, a single dandelion can produce up to 2,000 seeds. Sophie picked 11. That's 22,000 possibilities drifting across the lawn. Academically debatable phrase, you can't go home again. Maybe not. But sometimes home comes back to you in smaller, kinder pieces. 2 months later, we found ourselves standing in the frozen food aisle at Henderson's Grocery, debating whether Sophie's new obsession with mint chip, everything was a phase or a personality trait. Can I have this one too? She asked, holding up a box of bright green ice cream sandwiches that looked suspiciously like toothpaste. Only if Grammy gets final taste test rights, I said. Sophie grinned. Deal. Teddy, meanwhile, was busy lining up every single bag of frozen peas on the bottom shelf to make a fortress. Daniel appeared a moment later with a basket full of snacks and the same look of mild chaos in his eyes that most single parents learn to carry like a badge. Can we survive the next 2 days without grocery shopping again? He asked. I smiled. If not, we'll just eat dandelions and popsicles. He laughed, really laughed, and that sound still felt new. Later that evening, back at their house, we sat on the floor playing Go Fish with cards that had seen better days, and one corner chewed by a mystery culprit. Teddy blamed the cat. They don't have a cat. The kids eventually fell asleep in a pile of pillows and dinosaur blankets, and Daniel and I tiptoed into the kitchen for decaf and a quiet check-in. She asked to see them again, he said. Lindsay. He nodded. Next week. She wants to take them to the botanical gardens. I told her I'd come along. And how do you feel about that? He exhaled, cautious, but open. I don't think she's the same woman who threw your casserole on the floor. I think people can surprise us, I said. But I also think you're allowed to protect your peace. He nodded slowly. I don't know how I ever let her talk me into thinking you were the problem. You were in love, I said. And love has a way of reshaping the truth until it fits the person we want it to. I'm sorry for how long it took me to see it. I reached over and touched his hand. You saw it in time. That's what matters. That weekend, I took the kids to a small craft fair downtown. Teddy fell in love with a crocheted octopus the size of his face. Sophie picked out a handmade journal with golden stars on the cover and promptly named it her dream diary. We had hot cocoa even though it was 73 degrees outside. I let them pick cinnamon donuts the size of their heads. We sat on a curb and watched a man juggle fire while a little dog danced circles around him in a tutu. It felt like the kind of memory you remember in pieces, the sugar, the laughter, the way the sun hit your knees. On Sunday, I finally finished the painting I'd been working on for weeks. A small porch at dusk, lights glowing warmly inside a child's bicycle tipped over in the grass. I framed it and left it leaning against Daniel's kitchen wall. No note, no explanation, just something for them to see when they needed reminding. The next time Lindsay came to visit the kids, she brought snacks and 2 small potted plants, one for each child. She let Sophie name hers Daisy Queen, and Teddy named his fart face because of course he did. Daniel stayed close, but he didn't hover. Afterward, he told me it wasn't awful. That's progress, I said. He paused. She asked if we could do family therapy, all of us. I didn't respond right away. She says she's not asking to come back, just to repair some of the damage. And how do you feel about that? I asked again. I feel conflicted. I don't want the kids confused, but I also don't want them to think broken things can't be mended. You don't have to have all the answers, Daniel, I said. You just have to keep showing up. The next week, I took a short road trip to visit my cousin in Knoxville. 3 days, just me and the open road. Windows down, podcasts, playing my hair in complete rebellion. I needed the space to breathe, to remember that I still had a life outside of being a mother and grandmother, that Carolyn Mitchell was still a whole person, not just someone who floated between houses fixing hearts and folding laundry. When I got back, Daniel had replaced the doorknob on my back door, fixed the wobbly stair rail, and stocked my fridge with fresh berries. You really are trying to make me cry, I said, holding up the blueberries. I figured it was time I started showing up for you too. That evening, I tucked into bed with a good book, a cup of chamomile, and the sound of frogs croaking in the distance. Lexington nights always knew how to hum you to sleep when you needed it most. And as I drifted off, I thought about how far we'd all come, from the night Lindsay shattered my plate to now where everything broken had found some shape again. Not perfect, not spotless, but honest. And that, strangely enough, was more beautiful. Insight of the day. Sometimes healing looks less like a straight line and more like a spiral, but every loop still brings you closer to center. Quirky fact, an octopus has 3 hearts and blue blood. Teddy says this means they're aliens, obviously. Academically debatable phrase. You can forgive without forgetting. Maybe. But sometimes forgetting isn't the goal, reframing is. June brought with it the kind of summer warmth that smells like grass clippings and overripe peaches. Lexington turned green and golden at the edges, the sidewalks hot enough to make you skip a little, and the air thick with a kind of lazy hope. It also brought the first family therapy session. Daniel called the night before. I could hear the nerves in his voice tucked beneath every pause. Are you sure about this? He asked. It's not too late to back out. I was already ironing a blouse I hadn't worn since Easter. I'm sure I said. Besides, I'm curious to hear how my episodes get explained under fluorescent lighting. He snorted. Please don't say that in front of the therapist. No promises. The session was held at a neutral office just outside of town. There were soft chairs, a water dispenser that made weird gurgling sounds, and a box of tissues placed on a table like an open invitation. Lindsay arrived last dressed modestly, her eyes a little red around the edges, but otherwise composed. She sat down across from us and gave a small, nervous nod. No makeup, no performance, just Lindsay stripped down to something almost real. The therapist, a kind woman named Monica, who wore chunky jewelry and smelled faintly of peppermint, welcomed us in a voice so calm I almost fell asleep during her introduction. "Let's begin by hearing from each of you," she said, "and let's use I statements where possible." Classic. Daniel spoke first, then Lindsay, then Monica turned to me. I took a breath and said calmly, I feel like I was erased. Lindsay's face crumpled for a second and she looked down. I feel like I bent myself into silence to keep the peace. And in return, I became the problem, the inconvenience. Daniel reached over and touched my hand, just briefly, but it was enough. Lindsay spoke next. She said she was ashamed, that she spent so much time trying to control the narrative she never thought to understand it, that pushing me away felt easier than admitting she was jealous of my bond with Daniel, of the home I had built, of the quiet authority I never flaunted. I didn't cry, but I did feel something inside soften just slightly. We left the session a little lighter than we came in. No grand declarations, no magical forgiveness, just space. Space for things to breathe again. The rest of the summer unfolded like a story being rewritten. Lindsay began attending more sessions, alone with Daniel with the kids. She kept her word, no manipulation, no drama, just consistency. She even began sending postcards when she traveled for work, one to each child and one to me. The first one said, "Thank you for seeing me when I was blind. L." I kept it in a drawer, not for sentimentality, but because sometimes proof of growth is quiet and easily misplaced. On the 4th of July, we all ended up at Rita's backyard barbecue of all places. Yes, all of us. Daniel, the kids, Lindsay, me. Sophie wore a sparkly red headband. Teddy had face paint in the shape of a star on his cheek. Lindsay brought a watermelon she actually sliced herself. I brought my famous potato salad, which vanished within 20 minutes, as always. There were awkward moments, sure, but there was also laughter, shared sunscreen, a picture of Sophie on Lindsay's lap holding a sparkler while Daniel smiled beside them. No one flinched, not even me. Later that week, Daniel and I went through more old boxes in his garage. We found Sophie's baby shoes, a box of unopened thank you cards from their wedding, and a letter Frank had written to Daniel the year before he died. It was full of advice, Frank-style advice. Don't marry someone who can't laugh at themselves. Always double knot your shoes before a job interview. And son, no matter how old you are, listen to your mother. She's almost always right. We both laughed at that. But then Daniel looked up and said he'd be proud of you, you know. I folded the letter carefully. He'd be proud of you. Daniel smiled. We both know he'd say it was his potato salad recipe. I raised an eyebrow. We both know Frank couldn't boil water without calling me twice. One evening, after another peaceful drop-off, Lindsay asked if she could come in for just a minute. The kids were upstairs and Daniel was finishing dishes. She stepped into the living room and looked at the painting I'd hung above the mantel. My porch at dusk, soft light spilling through the window, everything quiet. That's beautiful, she said. Thank you, I replied. She hesitated, then added, I know we'll never be close, and that's okay, but I hope someday we can be easy. I considered that for a long moment. Easy takes time, I said, but we're not where we were. That counts. She nodded once, then let herself out quietly. Insight of the day. Sometimes redemption doesn't come with applause. It just sits beside you, awkward but sincere. Quirky fact: fireworks were once used in ancient China not to celebrate but to ward off evil spirits. Teddy still insists they're sky monsters. Academically debatable phrase, time heals all wounds, maybe. But sometimes time just gives us the distance to finally pick up the tweezers. It was late August when Daniel told me he was taking the kids on their first overnight trip without me. Just him, just them, no backup Grammy. They were going to a small lake a couple hours outside of Lexington fishing campfire s'mores. You know, the classic dad and kids memory maker. I smiled and nodded as he explained the cabin setup, the food they'd packed, how Sophie had insisted on bringing her unicorn sleeping bag, and Teddy had smuggled 3 flashlights in case of monster emergencies. But the truth, my throat tightened, not out of jealousy or worry, but out of something quieter, something that felt like being released. Like the final string you've been holding on to, just gently loosening in your hand. "You sure you'll be okay by yourself for a couple nights?" Daniel asked, loading the trunk with juice boxes and bug spray. "Of course," I said, handing Teddy his water shoes. "I may even throw a party." Sophie gasped. "Without us?" I winked. "A quiet party." They pulled out of the driveway with waves and shouts, and I stood there for a long moment, hand hovering near my collarbone, the way I do when I'm feeling something too big to name. And then I went back inside. And I danced. Right there in the kitchen, barefoot on the linoleum to a playlist I hadn't listened to in years. Fleetwood Mac, Simon and Garfunkel, Norah Jones, even a little Aretha for good measure. No one watching, no one needing anything, just me and breath and stillness. That evening, I made a salad I actually wanted to eat, read 3 chapters of a mystery novel uninterrupted, watched a nature documentary narrated by a man with a voice like warm socks. And when I went to bed, I stretched across the mattress like a cat and fell asleep with the window open and the fan humming. The next morning, I woke up slow. Tea in bed, birds at the feeder, a soft breeze through the curtains. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need to fill the day with errands or explanations. It was a new kind of freedom, not the kind that bursts open like fireworks, but the kind that tiptoes in and whispers, "This is your life now." When they came back 2 days later, sun-kissed and sticky with lake water and stories, the house filled with noise again. Teddy dropped his backpack in the hallway and immediately told me about the frog that wasn't dead, just sleepy. Sophie showed me a photo of the 3 of them eating marshmallows bigger than their fists. Daniel just smiled and said they didn't ask for screens once. I kissed each of their heads, then looked at my son. "You're doing it," I said. He looked confused. "Doing what?" "Becoming the man your father hoped you'd be, and the father your kids will always remember." That night, after the kids were asleep and the dishes were done, Daniel sat across from me at the table and asked, "So, what about you? What about me? What's next?" I laughed softly. "I was going to ask you the same thing." He shrugged, still figuring it out. Probably more therapy, some rebuilding, maybe even dating someday if I can remember how to talk about myself without mentioning fruit snacks and school drop-offs. I raised my tea. "Here's to dating profiles with fewer juice stains." He raised his glass in return. "And for you," I leaned back, smiling. "I want to paint more. Maybe start that little online shop I've been talking about. I want to visit the coast. I want to live a bit loudly before life tries to quiet me down again." "Mom," he said, "you've always lived louder than anyone I know." We laughed, and we didn't stop for a long time. 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, just a lavender envelope and careful cursive. It was from Lindsay. She wrote to thank me again. Not for forgiveness, she hadn't earned that yet, but for being the boundary she never had the courage to draw for herself. She said, "You showed me how dignity isn't about pride. It's about remembering who you are even when someone else forgets." At the end, she wrote, "I hope someday when the kids are grown, they talk about you the way people talk about legends." I folded the letter and placed it inside the back cover of Sophie's dream journal, because some things are worth saving for them for later. On the first day of school, Sophie wore a glittery backpack and Teddy insisted on bringing a peanut butter sandwich, even though he wasn't allowed to eat it in class. Daniel looked more nervous than either of them. As they walked to the car, I called out, "Don't blink. It's all going to go too fast." He nodded. "I know. I'm trying not to miss it anymore." And then they were gone, and I was back on the porch with my coffee and the morning sun warming my face. Insight of the day, letting go isn't always about moving on. Sometimes it's about stepping back far enough to see the whole picture. Quirky fact: C, otters hold hands when they sleep, so they don't drift apart. Sophie says she wants to try that next time there's a sleepover at Grammy's. Academically debatable phrase: happy endings are for fairy tales. Maybe. Or maybe they just take longer to write. And so my story finds its quiet landing. No grand finale, no thunderclap of justice, just the hum of a house that holds love again, and the gentle creak of a porch swing under an early evening sky. 6 months ago, I stood in a dining room covered in broken porcelain and shame. Today I stand a little taller, not because I fought harder than anyone else, but because I finally stopped shrinking for people who refuse to see me. I learned something through all of this, that the heart doesn't just break from betrayal, it breaks from neglect, from all the ways we slowly stop choosing ourselves and healing. It's not a straight path. It loops, it lingers, it stings where pride used to sit, but it does happen, if you let it. Daniel found his voice. The children found safety. Even Lindsay, in her own time, began to uncover parts of herself she had buried beneath the need to control. And me, I found peace in early mornings, in quiet cups of tea, in paintbrushes and laughter and bedtime stories read from my favorite armchair. To anyone listening right now, wherever you are, however you got here, I hope you know this. You're allowed to reclaim your space. You're allowed to demand kindness. You're allowed to begin again no matter how late it feels. Thank you for walking with me through this story. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself silenced in a place you helped build? Have you ever handed over your voice to someone just to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're still awake, there are 2 more stories waiting for you right here on the screen. Click one. I promise they'll surprise you.